Hey, welcome to another episode. Whether you're a beginner, intermediate, or advanced, we all have things that we're trying to memorize. One of those things that's really important and tough to memorize is the circle of fifths. I consider this to be one of the most important things to memorize. As you can see, I constantly draw it, I'm constantly working on it. I think I've done a good job of memorizing it, but there's still plenty of areas that I'm struggling with. But while I've been working with that, I came up with this cool idea, a way to only basically memorize part of it. Because the truth of the matter is, especially as beginners, we don't need the whole circle of fifths, right? I mean, yes, you've got the relative minors in here, and we have how many sharps and how many flats, and also what those key signatures look like. I mean, these are very important parts of the circle of fifths, but do we need that as beginners? No. Not in my opinion. Really, all we need, I believe, is this part of the circle of fifths. From F to F sharp, only in the major keys. So I invented a shortcut to learn that part of the circle of fifths, and that's what this episode's about. So let's get started. Before we dive into this, let's discuss where we are with minor pentatonic and also knowing the whole fretboard. Last week we started working up and down the E and A strings, playing the G minor pentatonic scale on one string at a time. This week we do the D and G strings, so for the D string you'll start on the 5th fret. For each string we'll play up and down the G minor pentatonic, singing the note names and also singing the scale degrees. For extra credit, we will continue working on finding and singing the G root note all over the fretboard. Now, let's check out my simplified fifths and fourths diagram. First, the circle of fifths. It can be pretty daunting to a new guitar player. If you haven't fully memorized the circle of fifths yet, this video might just blow your mind and introduce a much simpler way to memorize some of the key components of the circle of fifths without inundating you with higher level stuff that, frankly, you don't need at this stage. After a lot of studying and trying to figure this stuff out, I don't think the whole circle of fifths is necessary for us beginner and low-level intermediate guitar players. Don't get me wrong. As I said in the intro, obviously all parts of the circle of fifths are extremely important. Things like key signature and count of sharps and flats, also, the relative minor keys, all these things are extremely important. However, for beginners, the circle of fifths can be daunting and appear tough to completely memorize. For that reason, I created my own little diagram that simplifies what you're trying to remember, removes the more advanced pieces, and focuses only on knowing all fifths and fourths in both directions. There's a nice bonus for learning it this way. Everything you learn and memorize with this simplified diagram will completely apply to your later work and study of the circle of fifths. In other words, you really can't go wrong by first learning this easier diagram and mnemonic. Speaking of mnemonics, here's how I memorize the diagram. Bead, ghosts, can, fly. Or you could use this popular one. Battle ends, and down goes Charlie's father. I think the original saying used the name Charles, but I found that stuffy in today's day and age. Heck, you could even say, battle ends and down goes Chucky's father. Doesn't matter how you do it as long as you use the mnemonic to memorize that particular pattern. Regardless of what you use, make sure that you absolutely get this completely imprinted in your brain. And you should be able to do it from any point. So when you are starting at G, you need to know immediately that it goes to C. So that mnemonic is only to get you started in the beginning. Okay, along with memorizing bEIII, GCF, you also need to memorize its palindrome, FCGDAEB. A common mnemonic is Father Charles goes down and eats breakfast. Not quite as pompous when it's a priest. Anyway, I prefer to use fat cats go down alleys eating bagels. Again, it's not really the mnemonic that you use, it's just the fact that you must memorize all of it in a row. Also, I really want you to memorize this diagram in a vertical position like displayed here. as opposed to horizontal or the way we normally read. This is the way you want to visualize it, because going up, you'll be jumping up a fifth with each move, and going down, you'll be jumping a fourth with each move. So that is the magic of memorizing both directions. Also, you'll probably notice the sharp symbol at the top and the flat at the bottom. This is because the diagram simply wraps around after reaching one of the ends, and the notes become accidentals depending on the direction you go. In other words, if you were going up and doing fifths, we would read F, C, G, D, A, E, B, and then repeat the whole thing again, only by adding sharps. So it would be F sharp, C sharp, G sharp, D sharp, A sharp, E sharp, B sharp. The same is true for flats in the opposite direction. Before we wrap this week's lesson up, I'd like to point out something kind of cool. Notice that I put the guitar strings in the diagram. Many of you already know this, but I think it's fascinating that the guitar is tuned in fourths, and the open strings match up with our diagram. All of them, that is, except the B string, which is tuned in a major third instead of perfect fourths. For this reason, the C becomes a B and the F becomes an E, but you can see where bEII lines up specifically on the guitar fretboard. Now, let's take a look at this fretboard diagram here. I found this on the web. And I challenge you to study and look at other places on the fretboard and realize that bEII shows up all over the place. It's sort of unreal. Think about the power and freedom that you'll gain by understanding how the cycle of fourths and the guitar fretboard correlate and overlap. It's actually amazing. Remember, the B string is a half step off, but looking at a diagram like this can really open your mind to the potential with knowing the fourths when it comes to memorizing the fretboard. By the way, I only have natural tones or notes shown on here to make the pattern clearer, but the same exact patterns can be discovered with flats and sharps. For me, it's incredibly eye-opening. Now back to the diagram for a few more moments. Along with memorizing this diagram, if you also remember that C is in the 12 o'clock position of the circle of fifths and A is the relative minor of C with 0 flats or sharps, then you'll be a long way down the path of memorizing the circle of fifths. Key signatures will also be much easier for you after memorizing this, because the order of flats appearing in a key signature is bEIDGCF, and the order of sharps is FCGDAEB. Again, this is more advanced, but you'll already have it memorized for when the time comes to learn that part. That's pretty cool, right? I hope my diagram and this video were useful for you, and I hope you guys and gals are staying safe and healthy. Please leave a comment of where you are with your guitar practice and what you think of my simplified fifths and fourths diagram. Like and subscribe and share with your friends so we can all go on this journey together. Catch you next week.